So let's go back to the constructor. We finish it part, and then this is the really very simple understanding how the method is defined and how can the parameterized method. Just very simple example how the class containing the fields and with the complex objects inside inside the class, and just like the building information, and how can you define the very simple methods. Of course it has the professionals and complex methods to write down, but initially you have to understand how can you write down the different parameterized object and how can you use this object and methods into the your in application. That means into the how can you define the object, how can you implement the methods, and how can you call these methods and do the calculation, do the your business logic. That I mean. So if you see that we defined one methods like this class, the plot info class has two methods like here, and not the two, it has three methods like area calculation methods, the method giving the two input parameters, the arguments. It has a length and width, and it's multiply the return the volumes. The return type is double, so returning double is you can L multiply W, and then this is the another methods constructed by the three parameters, and then volume calculations. It is, you can see that you can also define this dot, we can also call these methods also. So it's calculating the area part. This is the one of the idea, that's how I will talk a little bit later, how can these methods this keyword can call the existing class methods or fields or and so on so forth. That's what we are discussing here. How can you the existing class or in the existing class fields and methods called with this keyword, or even though you can directly put it with, it's not required, but I give it to you the idea how can you use it, this keyword. So you call this method inside the volume method, so it's calculate the area part first, and then you just multiply by height. Very simple calculations, and return the volume of your methods. But even though we can put it like this way, as I said, you can create like the area calculations, and then you can say L multiply W, and then you can output it area calculations like that, or you can single line that depending on how you use it and how you define it. So here is the another methods. Is the methods are very simple methods. This is like the calculating building areas, and then you see how the fields itself that use it. So you have a as object definition into the your class. And here is a class, you define it, and it has own fields. So how can you use this complex object to for building or for defining your constructor, and how defining building your methods, the complex methods. So you see that this is that we use these methods, we check it is the building info object is not null, and that's, I think I will discuss it a bit later, the different control statements. Maybe this will be the next screencast about the different control statement, if else control statement, if else ladder control statement, break statement, switch, and then this statement, the control statement, I will discuss a little bit later part, but you got the idea what I mean here, this level. So where you check it, like if is the object itself is not null, and then we can calculate, we can also check the if condition, if is the greater than equal to 0, and then wide and length is greater than 0, and then you calculate the area calculation. So building info dot get length wide, that I will say it here, we define it here, the getter and set. It's very simple, getter and setter methods. Standard is the getter and setter methods. So setter methods, so we get we get the value that's we defined it here, the object itself, and then we get the value, check it is the greater than 0 and not the minus, and then it's if is get all the values greater than 0, then calculate the area. If it's not, the return 0 0, and then in complete case, if the object itself is null, then return 0 0. This is only the null pointer check, the really standard method writing algorithm or process. So if you say the different methods, it has these methods and only using the directly the object itself, the object field calculation, and this is the second methods. You pass the complex object itself. So you pass the parameter, you pass the object, the building info object, and then you check again the object. Is checking again the object, the building info object, area building calculation object directly use the field of the object itself, and then here pass the object itself is as the parameters, the method parameters, and check it all the necessary exactly same logic, but the object itself to pass as a parameter. And here's the field itself using the inside your class. So here's toString method we discussed. Then now we can try to create it. Now we discussed our implementation. So that means we define our four methods, and then defining all the constructor that we need, and then we try to initialize the object itself, and we try to create the object, initialize the object, and call the respective parameterized methods how it's look like. So that means we have four methods with the 2 arguments, with area calculation, volume calculations, which has 3 arguments in the methods, and inside the volume calculation we call the area calculation methods. But that means how can call another methods to the another methods. That's the idea, to give it to you a really professional way to handle it, not the hello world stuff. And then this the parameterized complex object as the method input parameter, and so on and so forth. So if you see, we build the object, that's the object we need to build, or we need to be create. So it has, you see the object like the building information, this method need this object, we just create this object, and we just simply use the getter and setters, and that's all. So getter and setter, because it has a default constructor, no argument need to pass, we didn't need it, but we simply use the default getter and setter methods. But even though you can create the second objects and so on and so forth. That's the idea. That's you can use what you like to do. So building ID, maybe this is the 100, then 100. That's all. This way. So you can build the second. How many object doesn't matter. You just simply create. On here we create one plot information object. Create and initialize with the constructor. You see this is the object has the the constructor 2 input arguments. It has ID and address ID. Exactly we did it, which is the object ID. So this is the constructor methods has 4 arguments, sorry, address and address ID, and then plot ID and building code. That exactly we were there. So you have a plot ID, address ID, plot ID, and then you have the type of the object. So here this is the object is a default constructor objects, and then this is the most important one we need to discuss. So you can create the object and initialize it via constructor. That's we have it here. This is the initialize, create the object. It's a building info object, building 1, and then set the values with the methods, with the setter methods. And here this is the line number 133. This object is created, object 1 with the constructor with the 2 arguments, and this is the object 2 is the constructor argument 4, and this is the default constructor methods. And how we create the object and but build the initialize the values with the methods. That means here, so it's initialize values exactly the same as like constructor, as like this constructor, but it has a different, it is a methods. So it has an ID, it has address ID, plot ID, and this is one of the constructor methods. But if it's this, you can also emit it. Then in that case you need to be define his own unique identity. If you have the same value into the method parameters, and then you need to be use this keyword. And if it's a different name at like, if you have it's like address ID, AD ID, then you need to be changed. We don't need to do this keyword, this keyword, then maybe the AD ID is enough. So address ID. I mean that. So even though this way you can handle it. But in common convention in Java, if you use the same object names, and then you can also use this way. So that means we create the object, we initialize